As far as non-mainstream religions go, Satanism is by far the one most mentioned in modern media. Horror movies, devoted Christians, online conspiracy theorists. Everyone seems to hold an opinion on what Satanism is and what its practitioners are like. Everything from child sacrifice by the elites to corruption and greed has been attributed to the existence of Satanism, but not many of Satanism's detractors have read any of the literature surrounding the religion. Today we will be going through Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, with the goal of understanding what Satanism's most popular denomination actually entails and which values its author preaches. I don't intend this video to be an argument for or against Satanism. I will simply summarize my understanding of the book, chapter by chapter, and leave you to form your opinion on the religion's flaws and merits. The Satanic Bible opens with a single page briefly summarizing LaVey's background and the reason he decided to start the Church of Satan. LaVey speaks about his frustration with the disconnect between man's nature and the values the Christian church preaches. He relays this through an anecdote from his youth, which he spent as an organ player. In his words, "On Saturday night, I would see men lusting after half-naked girls dancing at the carnival. And on Sunday morning, when I was playing the organ for 10 show evangelists at the other end of the carnival lot, I would see these same men sitting in the pews with their wives and children, asking God to forgive them and purge them of carnal desires. And the next Saturday night, they'd be back at the carnival or some other place of indulgence." In response, LaVey decided to start a church of his own. One that doesn't aim to oppose man's carnal desires, but instead embraces them fully. Since worship of fleshly things produces pleasure, there would then be a temple of glorious indulgence. What follows is an introduction by Magus Peter H. Gilmore, the second high priest of the Church of Satan who took over following LaVey's death. It's important to note that this introduction was obviously only added to later versions. One can find different introductions written by completely different people depending on the year their copy of the Bible was printed. However, as this is the introduction accompanying all versions published since 2005, I will briefly go over it. Most of the introduction centers on LaVey's life. It is a more comprehensive biography, following LaVey from his childhood to his death and his impact post-mortem. Gilmore also details his own relationship with LaVey from their first meeting to the moment he took over the church. While an interesting read, most of it does not directly tie into the teachings of Satanism. The most important idea one needs to pick up from the introduction is that of Gilmore's outlook on his church. He describes Satanism as a philosophy rather than traditional religion. Its tenets don't come from a supernatural external source, they are ideas and values crafted by LaVey himself from his past life experiences. With that in mind, we are now at the start of the Bible itself. LaVey opens the Bible itself with his thoughts on what was being portrayed as magic at the time. He believes all popular literature on magic was written by false prophets, anyone from followers of traditionally Christian values to con men looking to make money off of superstitions. In contrast, the Satanic Bible presents what LaVey views as real magic. In his own words, his Bible contains both truth and fantasy. Each is necessary for the other to exist, but each must be recognized for what it is. The meaning of these words only becomes clear a lot later in the book, once LaVey breaks down the nature of satanic rituals. The prologue which follows centers on the conflict between different religions that has existed since the beginning of time. As different regions and different eras come into contact with one another, values have to evolve with the changing culture. Gods of one culture become devils of another. But this replacement of religious values only exists because the virtues and sins preached by each religion are completely arbitrary. Not only are they not based on man's nature, they frequently go directly against it, preaching self-denial in one form or another. So LaVey calls for a new religious age, the age of Satan, whose tenets are bound to be the religion of the future. A religion based in man's nature, a religion of the flesh, a religion preaching abundance over abstinence. The 9 tenets of Satanism elaborate upon the idea of Satanism as the worship of nature. As these represent the core of the Satanic religion, I will read them in full. 1. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. 2. Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. 3. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. 4. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates. 5. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. 6. Satan represents responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for psychic vampires. 7. Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often worse than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. 8. Satan represents all of the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification. And 9. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years. The Book of Satan, also known as the Infernal Diatribe and symbolically represented through fire, is the first of the 4 books comprising the body of the Satanic Bible. Each of the 4 books are written in a different style, both in terms of perspective and form. The Book of Satan is written in verse from the perspective of Satan himself. It is split into 5 sections varying between 5 and 15 lines in length. The ideas within are conveyed through a symbolic lens referencing biblical imagery, mimicking the way values are conveyed in typical religious texts. The preface to the Book of Satan explains why this is the case. Throughout all of history, Satan has been a deity that was most frequently slandered by so-called man of God. The terms of good and evil were defined without Satan's input, and followers of the good path who preach charity and vow to turn the other cheek have never done so when it comes to behavior branded as sinful and by extension, evil. While this spiritual war was going on, Satan has never been given an opportunity to defend himself, to strike back against the lies and misconceptions spread about him. The Book of Satan is just that. The angry words of Satan himself, speaking up for the first time after millennia of being silenced by religious zealots. Satan calls into question the values propagated by the Christian God. He asks God where the rules placed upon man come from. Noticing the disconnect between them and human desire, Satan deems God's commandments as falsehoods, and calls for a break from the conventions in order for one to more closely follow the laws of nature and become the strongest version of themselves. Satan points out that all religion has been created by humanity. Any moral codes existing within should be perpetually questioned and never deified. By branding the word of man as divine, humanity has let the traditions of the dead control the lives of the living for too long. Satan demands a re-evaluation of traditional moral codes. He states that ancient traditions now only exist to hold progress and expansion. Beliefs that no longer benefit their believers should be discarded, and any accepted truths no longer backed up by results should be understood as lies. Just as the central symbol of Christianity, the crucifix, symbolizes weakness, the values spread within the Christian church are designed to weaken the believer. The Satanists should aim to overcome weakness and become the strongest version of themselves by discarding millennia-old moral codes, preventing them from doing so. Satan calls into question the Christian idea of loving thy enemies, pointing out that this belief goes against the very nature of man. The natural world is based on predation, and man falls into the natural world just as much as any wild animal. The natural response to being attacked by your enemies isn't love. It is uninhibited hate, and man needs to embrace it if he is to reconnect with the way he was created by nature. In contrast, the idea of love isn't natural either. Love in nature only exists as lust, as the means of continuing a species. And just like the nature of hate has been deemed sinful by the Christian Church, the natural state of love has been branded sinful as well. A skewed version of both is preached, designed to separate man from his origins in nature as much as possible. Satan denies the existence of an afterlife, both in the form of heaven and hell. Instead, he refers to life as the great indulgence and death as the great abstinence. If man wishes to redeem the limited amount of time he has alive, he shouldn't live his life based on the rules of a man-made afterlife with the goal of eventually living in abundance. He should live in abundance today, using his free will as his own salvation in order to satisfy all of his natural desires before he too turns to dust. Satan leaves us with the ultimate message of Satanism, one of seizing the natural power granted to you. Nature favors the strong, the bold, the unforgiving, the self-reliant. He who takes into his hands all of the attributes, urges, and desires nature has given him will prosper, while those who obey the Christian views of good and evil will be left as their prey. Following man-made moral codes will only lead you to suffer at the hands of nature. The Book of Lucifer, titled The Enlightenment and symbolized through air, focuses directly on the philosophy behind Satanism. While the Book of Satan stylistically follows religious texts, this book is split into chapters written in simple, easy-to-understand language intended to give rational explanation to each of Satanism's core ideas. The preface explains the title through the historic depictions of Lucifer. In Roman mythology, he exists as the embodiment of enlightenment. When he was translated into Christian mythology, this element of him was vilified. Christianity expects one to be set free by unquestioningly following truths spread by Christian texts. But LaVey argues that truth cannot exist without doubt. So in order to uncover the real truth about the state of mankind, the Book of Lucifer encourages one to doubt existing truths and find their own rational answers instead of relying on those imposed by Christian mythology. The first chapter of the Book of Lucifer sets up God as a concept created by man. The idea of God is considered a universal truth, despite the fact that God's presentation and the religious rites associated with him are constantly changing, both throughout history and even within different sects of the same religion. The only God Satanism subscribes to is nature. Unlike traditional gods though, the chaos of the forces of nature does not care about humanity. No amount of hopes and prayer is going to affect the balance of nature's forces. Nothing happens unless you do it. So Satanism encourages one to act and take control of their life instead of begging a higher power for improvement. Building onto that idea, LaVey goes into the creation of our view of God. Worshipping any depiction of God is just worshipping the man who created God by proxy. Instead of committing oneself to worshipping another man's value system, Satanism encourages one to create their own God, one which exists to fulfill one's own specific needs. At its core, Satanism is about worshipping yourself. It's important to note that LaVey does recognize here that ritual and dogma are important to a person's psyche, an idea that takes center stage in the Book of Belial. Having ritual and dogma in your life does not require an external God though. They are just as effective when your God is yourself. Next, LaVey looks at the ties between Christian tenets and nature. The 7 deadly sins in Christianity are all based on natural human instincts. Their vilification by Christianity holds human progress, as each of them are nature's way of leading you to be your best self. Even modern Christianity is moving away from their pillars. Churches are becoming more progressive in terms of what they consider sinful, and their focus lies on accepting yourself as a sinner and living in guilt, rather than on avoiding sin altogether. Christianity is molding itself to fit human instincts, while Satanism is crafted around human instinct. In this sense, Satanism is weaponized selfishness. It is only called Satanism as it is the opposite to the Christian view of good and evil. To a Satanist, anything that benefits them in some way is good, while anything that affects them negatively is bad. The moral distinction between the two is not a point of consideration when a Satanist makes a decision. Any action that would impose guilt within the Christian system is one that the Satanist should revel in for their own betterment. Expanding upon the name of his religion, LaVey reveals the meaning of Satan's name, the adversary. Satan's existence represents opposition to all religions who rid man of his natural instincts. He is a successor to the old gods of sin, like Pan or Dionysus, who once stood for good before being demonized with the rise of Christianity. This change in management made any old gods representative of man's carnal urges, the new religion's devils. Interestingly, all of the gods turned devils possess animal characteristics. While the Satanist embraces his connection to nature, the Christian refuses to accept that he too is an animal. Satan within LaVeyan Satanism is primarily a symbol of the forces of nature. Any mention of him throughout the Bible can easily be swapped out for nature without changing the book's meaning. And worshipping nature does not require selling one's soul. It only requires one to act in accordance with their animalistic instincts, whether they are considered good or evil within the Christian system. While the Christian is controlled both by fear of the man-made God and the man-made Satan, the Satanist is freed by his connection to the world outside of humanity's creation. The next few chapters discuss the Satanic views on love. Unlike Christianity, which preaches showing kindness to all fellow man, Satanism calls for one to only show love to those who deserve it. It equally asks of one to show hate to those deserving of hate. Forced love and repressed hate go against human nature and are deeply discouraged by Satanists. Loving everyone leaves you in a position where your love is easily exploitable, and love given out too freely loses its meaning. So pick those who deserve your love carefully and love them strongly. Repressed hate also leaves one forever overcome with hate. Christians who preach loving thy enemies also claim God will punish them for their wrongdoings. Just like every movement of forced love, it results in increased levels of hate towards anyone not a part of it. By not wasting their love and releasing their hate, the Satanist is able to express their love much more strongly. The next chapter aims to dispel myths regarding Satanism and sex. Satanism supports one's freedom to express their sexuality in a way that best suits their nature. While common depictions of Satanism include polygamy, Satanic views on sex extend to both the desire of a single partner or more. Forcing yourself to have more partners to prove you're free is just as bad as forcing yourself to have none. Both extremes go against your natural desires and are bound to leave you unhappy. The same idea extends to asexuality. If one has no desire for sex, forcing themselves into it goes against their own nature. Furthermore, being preoccupied with demonstrating your sexual freedom or sexual purity rather than accepting sex as just a part of nature leaves you mentally stuck. The next section of the chapter goes into the Satanic views on fetish. Satanism encourages any form of satisfying your sexual desires, as there is no natural reason to avoid doing so. The mentioned examples of fetishes are sadism and masochism, which are both a core part of human nature. However, LaVey spends a considerable amount of time speaking about how all of the previously mentioned ideas only apply with able-minded, consenting adults. Satanism supports human sexual freedom, so infringing the sexual freedom of another by forcing yourself on them goes against the Satanic view on sex. But the consent in this example only applies to those participating in the act. The opinions or criticisms of outside parties who have a problem with how you choose to express your sexuality should not be given a second thought. Interestingly, Satanism recognizes a difference between spiritual and sexual love. In an ideal scenario, the two go together, but that isn't always the case. Where there is a disparity between the spiritual and sexual love, the Satanist will resort to seeing other people. This is where LaVey makes the argument that cheating on your partner is not only natural and something that should be encouraged, but also strengthens spiritual love by not imposing your sexual desires on an unenthusiastic partner. This is equated to masturbation, which is also allowed within Satanism as a way of supplementing one's sexual appetite. It is a form of self-love which is present in all of nature, but has been demonized by Christians due to the fact that it leads to only pleasure and never conception. But this search for pleasure isn't only supported by Satanism, it is deemed necessary. LaVey closes this chapter by asserting that both strict religious moral codes and sexual revolution promiscuity would destroy humanity. The Satanic take on sex is the only one which can lead people to enriching, pleasurable lives. This chapter introduces a new concept into the Bible, that of psychic vampires. Psychic vampires are individuals that drain your energy by making you feel responsible for or indebted to them. They don't directly ask for your help or presence, but rather guilt you into doing things for them without you knowing why. They are either individuals or organizations that will feign ignorance, incompetence, or disability to convince you they are poor souls and get you to do things that benefit them out of altruism. Satanism asks you to evaluate whether these donations of time or money are truly in line with your desires or just driven by guilt. It asks you to always weigh out what you give and take in any given relationship. And in the case that your contribution is not in line with your desires or not matched by theirs, you need to learn how to say no to any action that doesn't benefit you. Satanism at its core is about indulgence in your natural desires over abstinence. Man-made moral codes are only created by the church as a way of controlling the masses. Nature doesn't obey man's rules. However, indulgence shouldn't be confused with compulsion. Compulsion is created by a lack of indulgence. Indulgence requires making the choice to satisfy your desires. Compulsion implies a lack of choice, being enslaved to your urges. Indulgence is not only healthy, but necessary in order to lessen frustration and commit yourself to your goals. Abstinence might be fashionable in other religions, but trapping yourself in it ruins your psyche. Through indulgence, Satanists become the masters of their desires. Through abstinence, Christians only become slaves to their compulsions. On the choice of a human sacrifice sets up ideas that are crucial for the third book in the Satanic Bible, the Book of Belial, as it goes into the ideology behind Satanic magic. Traditionally, sacrifice rituals are believed to work by using the life force of blood to appease demons and strengthen spells. This is the reason white magicians kill lower animals as parts of their ceremonies. Satanism does not require that. In fact, a Satanist will always use himself as a sacrifice. Satanic rituals actually work by harnessing strong emotion. That emotion is not harnessed through blood, it is harnessed through actions like sex or rage. If a Satanist does wish to commit a physical sacrifice to elicit emotion though, they will never harm a child or animal. Children and animals are sacred within the Satanic religion, as they are rare examples of beings that don't impede on their natural desires. Similarly, a Satanist would never harm themselves for a ritual, as a real Satanist should hold themselves in high regard. The only people deserving of a physical sacrifice are those who have deliberately hurt the Satanist. Psychic vampires frequently fall into this category and shouldn't be forgiven, as society has a way of coming up with excuses for those who cause harm. Blaming one's mental health or their past experiences for the way one has hurt another is a sign of weakness and insecurity. More importantly, it is the sign of a psychic vampire, and the Satanists should go out of their way to destroy them before they destroy you. If you desire to sacrifice anyone within a ritual, it should be them. The following chapter goes into the Satanic view of the afterlife, or rather the lack thereof. LaVey argues that man is the only animal aware of his own upcoming death. While animals ruthlessly fight to survive until the end, man has lost this instinct through evolution and has been trained to accept his death. The main source of this training is religion, which nurtures the acceptance of death through the promise of a pleasant afterlife. In contrast, a Satanist fears death due to having enjoyed his life. An afterlife's main purpose is to pacify the populace. It gives a sense of pride and accomplishment to those who don't have any, and the dissolution of the ego that comes with it is used as a replacement for material wealth to those without it. But Satanic indulgence makes life worth living in the most natural, carnal way. An afterlife isn't necessary when the ego is fulfilled during life. Therefore, Satanism encourages the gratification of the ego as a way of appreciating the limited time we have on earth. A self-respecting Satanist will never take their own life, as all of the earthly pleasures are taken away once one makes that choice. Satanic suicide is only acceptable as an indulgence, in extreme circumstances where one's life is so terrible that death is a preferable option. Interestingly, the indulgent suicide is the one widely categorized as a sin in other religions, while giving your life for a political or religious cause is considered a noble act of martyrdom. The Satanist laughs at this notion. Giving up all of your indulgences to further a political or a religious cause is not martyrdom. It is pure masochism and not something to be respected. Satanism does not boast many religious holidays. As Satanists recognize themselves as their own god, the ultimate Satanic holiday is one's own birthday. The second holiday recognized by LaVey is Walpurgisnacht, also known as Eve of May. Taking place on May 1st, it is the day that all demons come forth and celebrate the start of spring. And finally, the third Satanic holiday is All Hallows Eve or Halloween, as it is traditionally the night that witches would rise and perform their rituals. In addition to the big tree, Satanists also celebrate solstices and equinoxes, as the start of each season is a celebration of nature. The Black Mass is the source of most misconceptions around Satanism. Depictions of it include various disgusting and morally repugnant acts in the form of a ceremony celebrating Satan. But the Black Mass, as it is popularly known, is an invention by the Christian Church. The origins of the real Black Mass lie in art. It started out as theater, a psychodrama designed to parody the Catholic Mass. It included private gatherings by artists and was done purely for pleasure and fun, rather than with the goal of worshipping the devil. Its blasphemy of other religions, especially Christianity, was used as a way for artists to express their dissatisfaction with the institutions in place through shock value. Any modern Black Mass should target institutions that are currently considered sacred instead of Christianity, with LaVey giving the examples of patriotism, psychiatry, and liberalism. Furthermore, even if there is some historical backing to a Black Mass as the Christian Church presents it, the Satanists of the past are not the same as the Satanists of today. Historically, anyone doing anything the Church considered evil was labeled a Satanist. This ranged from atheistic individuals to various cults and sects. LaVeyan Satanism isn't about performing rituals akin to the Black Mass. It is about realizing your inner power and utilizing it unashamedly. There are constant rumors about rich and successful people being secret Satanists. Well, in the LaVeyan sense, all of them are. they are, knowingly or unknowingly, practicing Satanism, as they couldn't have gotten to where they are now without indulging in their carnal instincts. The elites are Satanists, not because they eat babies as a part of the Black Mass, but because they've weaponized their selfishness to gain power. The Book of Belial, titled The Mastery of the Earth and symbolized through Earth, focuses on the magical side of Satanism. The preface explains that, either through ignorance or deliberate effort, rituals related to black magic seem to be shrouded in mystery and misinformation. Unlike conventional magic, which is rooted in falsehoods, Satanic magic is based on psychology and objective reason. It exists in accordance with natural law, and the grounded mystical procedures of Satanism are designed to build the Satanist's independence and self-reliance. It is closer to using knowledge of yourself and of other people's behaviors to gain the upper hand in life than to a summoning of external forces. Just like the Book of Lucifer, the Book of Belial is written in plain English, but its content takes the form of a guide rather than a philosophical argument. Satanism does not recognize the concept of white and black magic, as the distinction between the two is rooted in Christian values. A Satanist will use whichever form of magic will work to their benefit and resolve the problem they wish to overcome. Satanic magic is separated into two categories. Ritual magic, also known as greater magic, is done in a specific area in the form of a ceremony and driven by emotion. Most of the Book of Belial focuses on this type of magic. Non-ritual magic, also known as lesser magic, includes the methods a Satanist will use to manipulate others into doing their bidding. The simplest distinction is this: greater magic is used to empower oneself and to harness and control their own emotions, while lesser magic is used to psychologically manipulate others. There are three main methods of utilizing lesser magic to gain control over another's mind, and each witch or warlock has to take an honest look at themselves and decide which of these most naturally works in their favor. The first method is sex or sex appeal. This was the most powerful spell for women during the witchcraft days, then known as glamour or fascination. It is the most obvious of the three methods, that of using seduction to achieve one's goals. While it can theoretically be used by anyone, it is most often and most effectively used by attractive women against men. The second method is sentiment. It includes presenting yourself in a fantastical or nostalgic way in order to trick others into trusting you and getting control over them that way. It's most effectively used by children or the elderly, as people are generally more likely to trust a young child or a kind old man who they don't consider a threat. Sentiment is most effectively used against children, who are more likely to fall for the sweet old lady next door type. The third method is wonder. While sex and sentiment encourage one to present themselves as appealing to their target, wonder does the exact opposite. It consists of using a strange or unusual appearance in order to strike fear into your target and get their attention that way. Then, it becomes easier to manipulate others to do your bidding by making them afraid of the consequences should they say no. These three methods aren't just based in appearance and behavior though. LaVey notes that odor is a powerful element that shouldn't go unutilized. While sex appeal obviously includes the use of natural pheromones, sentiment offers a broad range of options regarding the scent a witch or warlock might decide to use. Generally, sentiment should include pleasant or nostalgic smells, like cooking. However, if one knows their target well, they can customize their scent to the target's own life and achieve an even greater fondness. For example, a person who grew up in a fishing village might find the conventionally unpleasant scent of fish nostalgic, allowing the witch or warlock to take control. Moving on to greater magic, each type of ritual corresponds to a general human emotion. The lust ritual functions as a love spell, targeting someone the Satanist wishes to have sex with and bringing that into reality. The compassion ritual is performed with the goal of helping yourself or others achieve something without causing immediate harm. And the destruction ritual, known as a hex or a curse, is used to damage those you hate. It's important to be wary of the consequences of your ritual. For best results, one should keep in mind the satanic teachings of the Book of Lucifer when deciding whether to perform a certain ritual. If performing a compassion ritual, be careful so that your gift to another doesn't eventually result as an obstacle in your path. One shouldn't perform a compassion ritual for another if the outcome comes at the cost of the Satanist's own well-being. And if performing a destruction ritual, a Satanist should feel no remorse. If your victim is truly someone you hate and someone deserving of punishment, you shouldn't care if the victim survives. Any damage to the victim's livelihood should be welcomed rather than regretted. A satanic ritual can be performed individually or as part of a group. A group ritual will strengthen the result, but one should only seek those who believe in the same ideas one believes in and who strongly feel the emotion the ritual is focused on. Each ritual has a standardized opening and closing. Only the middle section of a ritual is personalized to the Satanist's own desires. The formalized parts are there to separate the intellectual outside world from the emotional contents of the ritual. The chalice, the altar, the bells, the chants, they all serve the above purpose. And finally, there is no room for shame in a ritual unless the feeling of shame is critical to the ritual itself. As satanic rituals are primarily driven by emotion, one needs to feel free to express it fully without second-guessing their decision to do so or the form the emotion comes out in. There are 5 key ingredients to each satanic ritual, and ensuring that all 5 are satisfied is crucial to the success of the ritual. For a ritual to work, one must truly desire the end result. Satanic magic is not like magicianship, where the goal is to impress others with your magic. Your desire needs to always be the goal of the ritual you're performing, rather than the concept of the ritual itself. As the purpose of a satanic ritual is to release emotion, do not consider the reaction of others. Don't stifle your natural desires and let your temptations guide you. It's important to consider the timing of the spell. An effective spell needs to be cast when your victim is most receptive. In most situations, that is going to be while the victim is asleep. People are most passive during the dream state, roughly 2 hours before a person awakens. The goal of a satanic ritual in this case is to induce ideas during the victim's dream state that will then become embedded into their waking subconsciousness. For lust rituals targeting women, the most susceptible timing is directly before and after a woman's period, when she is most fertile. The caster doesn't necessarily have to track the woman's menstrual cycle. LaVey argues that man has a natural ability to sense a woman's fertility. While this ability might have been lessened through socialization, one can still learn to control their subconscious instincts by understanding when they are most drawn to and most repelled by a woman. Men are a lot more susceptible to lust rituals. As long as all of the man's sexual energy hasn't been drained, they will be naturally receptive to a witch's spells. Imagery accounts for any object which serves to intensify the emotions behind the ritual. It is a substitute for the object of your desire, and the manipulation of it will contribute to a ritual's success. For compassion rituals, you must create your desire in a medium of your choosing, whether that be on canvas, in writing, through sculpting, etc. For destruction rituals, you must destroy a proxy of your enemy if you wish to destroy your enemy. For lust rituals, you must obtain imagery either belonging to your victim or reminiscent of them. You should match your desired situation as closely as possible. Don't limit yourself to only visual imagery. Utilize all of your 5 senses. Imagery works as a mechanism for bringing the object embedded into the image into material reality. It's a tool used unknowingly by children to represent their desires, mostly through drawings and toys. For a Satanist to reach their full potential, they need to be aware of and utilize the power of imagery. Satanic rituals are based on the accumulation and direction of force towards an end goal. Worrying about the ritual's success before and after performing it dilutes the mental, physical, and emotional energy you are able to harness, and prevents the accumulation of enough force within the ritual itself. Once your desire has been established, this emotional energy should only be given vent during the ceremony. The purpose of the ritual is to free you from the thoughts consuming you, so contemplating, worrying, or scheming outside of it goes against the core idea of the ritual. An often forgotten but crucial element of the ritual is the balance factor. It is most important in lust and compassion rituals, and it includes simply knowing your limits. A magician's strongest talent is having a good understanding of themselves. Before performing a ritual, you need to ask yourself if your goal is realistically attainable to you. If your attempted rituals are consistently failing, it is time to introspect on your ego and abilities and adjust your goals accordingly. A satanic ritual is only successful when a Satanist works within their nature, rather than trying to supersede it. The following few chapters are presented as a step-by-step guide to performing a satanic ritual, including the incantation said and all of the items required. I will be skipping a lot of the information within these pages, as they come across as more of a practical guide, and my main goal in this video is focusing on the philosophy and values behind Satanism. Furthermore, there is so much detail within these pages that it becomes difficult to cover without effectively reading the book out loud. If you wish to attempt one of these, you can easily find a copy of the book online and follow along. Instead, I will dive more into the philosophy of satanic magic and how it actually works, according to the Satanic Bible. If it wasn't clear by now, these rituals are not used to directly obtain external objects. They are purely emotional ceremonies, designed to release the Satanist's pent-up emotion. The lust ritual isn't casting a love spell. It is releasing your pent-up lust by simulating your desired outcome and masturbating. The compassion ritual will not give you or anyone else an object of your desire. What it will do is free you from said obsession. The destruction ritual will not harm your enemy. It will allow you to express your rage and hatred onto an effigy of them. After all of the emotion consuming one's mind has been drained by the ceremony, they are free to continue living their life to their fullest potential. With a clearer mind, they are able to pursue the target of their lust or the object of their desire uninterrupted. This is why the balance factor is so important. You can free yourself from your desired emotion within the ritual, but you can only achieve your desires outside of it if you were naturally able to do so anyway. The rituals don't fulfill your desires. They just put you in a mindset that makes you more likely to fulfill your desires afterwards. All of the devices used in the ritual accomplish the same purpose, amplifying one's emotions during the ceremony. They do this in one of two ways. They either stimulate one's desires directly, such as by wearing promiscuous clothing and using a naked woman as an altar during a lust ritual, or by creating a space where one is uninhibited in expressing all of their emotion. The second part is hinted at during one of the first chapters of the Book of Belial. The constant use of esotericism is done to create a space outside of our normal reality. The 13 steps of the ritual provided do exactly this. They separate the physical space of the ceremony room from the outside world through the introduction of esoteric decor, and they create an aura of mysticism through the chants and dogmatic movement. A person placed in a space outside of their everyday life is less likely to feel shame about their outpour of emotions and will leave the ritual fully drained of negative thoughts, ready to pursue betterment, which is what the core idea of Satanism comes down to. And finally, we have the Book of Leviathan, titled The Raging Sea and symbolized through water. The Book of Leviathan is an extension of the Book of Belial, as it offers chants to be used in satanic rituals. Unlike traditional religious chants, which invoke shallow offerings to the gods, satanic invocations are designed primarily around evoking emotion. This serves both of the mentioned elements of the satanic ritual. It provides a level of dogma to separate the ritual from the everyday world and heightens the caster's emotional outpour. However, LaVey notes here that an unconstrained wizard is able to complete a successful ritual without employing satanic scripture, as long as his words are charged with emotion. These chants aren't a necessity for the ritual. They're just a tool to be used if one doesn't have the words required to release all of their emotions during a ritual. The invocation to Satan is the opening invocation of the ceremony, included in one of the 13 steps and designed to separate the ritual from your life before and after it. It consists of accepting Satan as a part of yourself and commanding infernal powers to give you the strength to reach your indulgences. Next, we have a list of deities from various religions referred to as the devil. Any or all of these can be called out during the ritual, but they must be taken out of the book's alphabetical order into something that sounds effective phonetically. Remember, your goal isn't summoning a deity, it is using the power behind these symbols to release your emotion. LaVey provides invocations for each of the 3 types of rituals. They are written a lot more poetically than the rest of the book. As previously mentioned, they're designed to incite emotion through phonetic effectiveness. The invocation for the lust ritual begins with announcing your feelings of lust and invoking infernal powers to give that lust a physical presence. It asks of Satan to possess the mind of the targeted person and satisfy your desires. It moves on to announcing that you will create an image of the target through acquired symbols and use them to feel release, before moving on to separate invocations for men and women. Both are very explicit in their word choice and are written as statements of what will happen rather than prayers for what you wish to happen. The male invocation exclaims that his partner will be helpless and submit to his will, calling to Pan for strength to manifest his thoughts into reality. The female invocation incites lust in her target instead, exclaiming that her target will come to her naturally. It calls to the great harlot of Babylon, Lilith, and Hecate to help her satisfy her lust. The destruction invocation summons all of the caster's rage and directs it towards their enemy. It calls upon the dark powers to annihilate and torment your victim, before moving on to explicit descriptions of the physical suffering the dark powers are going to inflict upon your enemy. The compassion invocation, interestingly enough, also starts with the caster collecting their wrath, but this time directed at the torment your target has received unjustly. It commands infernal powers to rid an undeserving person of anguish and invokes Satan to indulge said person's desires, both present and future. It assures the infernal powers that the target is also a child of Satan, the flesh of the earth, and employs Satan's mercy upon them. The last chapter of the Bible, just like the opening, does not fit neatly into either of the 4 books. This section is written a lot more cryptically than the rest of the book, employing heavy symbolism and phrasing that is unusual for the English language. Before diving into the keys themselves, LaVey explains what the following chapter entails. Enochian is an ancient language used in satanic magic. It resembles Arabic, Hebrew, and Latin, and has a grammatical and syntactical basis. Enochian has been designed specifically so its barbaric tonal qualities incite strong emotional reaction, both in the person speaking it and in any people it is spoken to. The 19 Enochian Keys serve as the ancient pillars of Satanic religion and have existed long before the Satanic Bible was written. While a 19th century translation exists, it was translated by the Order of the Golden Dawn and whitewashed with Christian terminology. With the goal of providing a more accurate translation, the keys in the Bible have been translated again by LaVey himself. Each key is presented first in the original Enochian and then in LaVey's English translation. Reading the keys, it is clear that these ancient texts formed the philosophical basis of the 9 statements of Satanism. The entirety of the Satanic Bible up to this point has served the purpose of translating these 19 passages into plain English and elaborating upon the values preached within. So while the Enochian Keys are the final and shortest section of the book, they are far from the least important, as this represents the core of the entire religion. The first key is the initial proclamation from Satan, the Lord of the Earth, recognizing the power that resides in those bold enough to recognize the laws of nature. It ends in a series of sentences that we will see in 9 of the 19 keys, calling for one to accept their nature as a human and embrace all of humanity as equal through their status as a part of nature. Only then can one understand their creation. The second key celebrates the lust that leads to human procreation. The third key establishes that the world of nature is under Satan's control. All of humanity has, for all of time, been led by Satanists, who have been appointed by Satan and given the power to control people from governmental positions, becoming the justice and truth of the earth. The fourth key speaks about Satan's creation of the first man, and the increase of his numbers through the passage of time. Humanity is established as the sons of pleasure, and encouraged by Satan to indulge in their desires. The fifth key confirms that Satan has sent priests and false prophets onto the earth for the purpose of misdirection. They are designed to be the destroyers of the self, and indulgence is the way of overcoming them. The sixth key elaborates on the people placed into governmental positions by Satan, explaining that they have created the Church of Satan in order to praise their creator and all other creatures. The seventh key places the strength of man in his lust. It is what gives man both pleasure and the continuance of his bloodline. As such, harlots are the living dwellings of nature's strength. The eighth key centers on the coming of the Satanic Age. It states that humanity has embraced comfort above all and are, consciously or not, no longer divided in embracing Satan. The ninth key is about the rise of man injecting psychoactive substances into his body. It warns against falling into substance abuse as it leads to the enslavement of man to the substance, which goes against Satanism's celebration of independence. Instead, it encourages the indulgence of your natural desires. The 10th key calls to wrath and violence. It embraces wrath through symbolic imagery, demonstrating the power of wrath's desolation. The 11th key features Satan calling upon the dead. He establishes himself as the worshipper of the flesh that lives forever, as man is bound to the earth and is posthumously transformed into a part of nature until the end of time. The 12th key is a vent of displeasure towards man's need for misery, referring to this curious impulse as a mystery and calling for wrath upon all harbingers of misery. The 13th key incites lust in the lustless. It guides those who consider lust a sin towards unveiling the mystery of his own and humanity's creation. The 14th key calls for vengeance as the only manifestation of justice. It moves people to take justice into their own hands and correct any injustices done towards them. The 15th key refers to seekers of traditional spirituality, calling them the spinners of cobwebs that weave the earth with dryness. Satan is presented as righteous, while the seekers of spiritual gods are presented as only carrying false honor. The 16th key celebrates the wondrous diversity of the earth and the dichotomies between man. These contrasts that separate creatures are a crucial part of nature. The 17th key invites the ignorant to take upon enlightenment and gain a greater understanding of themselves through Satan. The 18th key celebrates the enlightenment of the masses who realize that their strength is acquired through indulgence in natural desires. It announces that Satan has been made known to all of the earth and invites everyone to take part in the comfort of indulgence. The 19th and final key is the longest one. Its purpose is sustaining the natural balance of the earth and restoring the law of the jungle. It serves as the foundation of success for the lover of life. It asks the reader to embrace Satan as the beginning of comfort, before going into the creation of the earth in more detail. Satan created Earth to be governed by her nature. From the beginning, it was created to run on lust, and lust has been created to serve all of the Earth's creatures. The divisions between said creatures and the Earth's diversity have been placed there on purpose. Every creature was made to possess different qualities, and none of them are equal. But while this diversity is celebrated by Satan, he regrets making man. Man is the only one that rejects the rules of nature and tries his hardest to go against him. Satan calls for the destruction of man at his own hand. He wishes for man to weed out one another until there are none left. He wishes for man to destroy one another's buildings until there is nothing left but caves. He wishes for man to be forgotten. The only alternative and the only path to undefiled wisdom is through destroying the rotten and leaving behind only those who accept their own nature. Those are the words that end Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. Whether you agree with these ideas or not, you cannot disagree with the fact that the Satanism represented by its Bible is very different from its portrayal in the media. Satanism is not about worshipping the devil and sacrificing babies. It is about taking control of your own life and living it to its fullest. About acting to your benefit, even if it ends up harming another. About indulging your every desire, even if it goes against traditional moral codes. About loving with all of your love and hating with all of your hate. About becoming the strongest, most successful version of yourself, no matter what it takes or what happens to others in the process. It is weaponized selfishness. And whether that is something to fear or something to aspire to is for you to decide.